Kirk to Rayborn, report. I'm required to make a security confirmation. When I call my ship, if you list your personnel, cargo requirements, any special needs.
Space has always been the perfect place to tell stories that Earth wasn't ready to hear. That's exactly what Star Trek did. While most people remember the franchise for its starships, alien civilizations, and optimistic vision of the future, there was another side to its legacy. A side that sparked outrage, frightened television executives, and even led to episodes being pulled from the air. During the late 1960s and early 1970s, Star Trek wasn't just entertaining audiences. It was challenging them. It tackled disease, prejudice, violence, mental illness, and moral dilemmas in ways that many broadcasters considered far too disturbing for family television. In the United Kingdom, several episodes were withheld by the BBC for years because officials believed they dealt too harshly with themes such as torture, madness, sadism, and disease. Today, those episodes are available to watch, but their controversial reputation has never disappeared. Looking back decades later, it's fascinating to see just how far ahead of their time these stories really were. Let's begin with one of the strangest and most unsettling episodes ever produced. Number 3, Miri. At first glance, everything seems perfectly normal. The Enterprise receives a distress signal from what appears to be an exact duplicate of Earth. Streets, buildings, and even the architecture resemble an ordinary American suburb. It looks peaceful. Too peaceful. Captain Kirk, Spock, Dr. McCoy, and the landing party quickly discover that something has gone terribly wrong. Adults are nowhere to be found. The streets are silent. The only people left alive are children. Then they encounter a frightened girl named Miri. She explains that every adult died years ago after a mysterious disease spread across the planet. The children survived, but only because the illness affects them differently. As the crew investigates, they discover an abandoned laboratory where scientists had attempted to create a treatment for aging. Instead of extending life safely, the experiment created a horrifying plague. Adults rapidly became violent before dying, while children aged so slowly that some were actually centuries old despite still thinking like young kids. That revelation changes everything. The children aren't innocent survivors. They're emotionally immature people who have lived for hundreds of years without guidance, education, or real civilization. Fear has become their way of life. When purple marks suddenly appear on Kirk and McCoy's skin, the crew realizes they've been infected as well. The countdown has begun. With only days before the disease reaches its deadly stage, McCoy races against time to develop a cure while Kirk tries to convince frightened children that the adults they've learned to hate are actually trying to save them. The situation grows increasingly dangerous when the older children steal the crew's equipment, convinced that all grown-ups eventually become monsters. What makes Miri disturbing isn't graphic violence. It's the atmosphere. Children form angry mobs. Adults slowly realize they're dying. An entire civilization has collapsed because one scientific breakthrough went catastrophically wrong. For viewers in 1970, the combination of disease, terrified children, and psychological horror felt unusually intense for what was expected to be family entertainment. After airing once in Britain, the BBC reportedly received complaints from viewers, and the episode disappeared from television schedules for years before eventually returning decades later. Looking back now, Miri feels less like science fiction and more like a cautionary tale about scientific ambition without responsibility. And remarkably, it was only the beginning. Number 2, Plato's Stepchildren. Some television moments change history forever. This episode contains one of them. The Enterprise answers a distress call from a remote planet inhabited by a group of humans possessing extraordinary telekinetic powers. Calling themselves descendants of Plato's followers, these rulers see everyone else as little more than toys. Their abilities allow them to control people's bodies completely. What begins as diplomacy quickly becomes humiliation. Captain Kirk, Mr. Spock, Nurse Chapel, and Lieutenant Uhura are forced to perform degrading acts for the entertainment of their captors. They cannot resist. Every movement is controlled by someone else's mind. The psychological cruelty is almost unbearable. Instead of simply imprisoning the crew, the rulers delight in stripping them of their dignity. Then comes the moment that would become one of television's most discussed scenes. Kirk and Uhura are mentally forced toward each other. Neither wants it. Neither has any control. Yet, under telepathic influence, they share what became one of the earliest interracial kisses ever shown on American primetime television. Today, that scene may not seem particularly shocking, but in 1968, it challenged deeply rooted racial attitudes throughout the United States. Interestingly, many historians believe the BBC's hesitation wasn't primarily because of the kiss itself. Instead, officials were reportedly more concerned about the episode's sadistic themes, psychological abuse, and unsettling treatment of its characters than the groundbreaking romance. Regardless of the exact reason, the episode remained absent from British broadcasts for many years. Ironically, what once caused anxiety among broadcasters later became one of Star Trek's proudest achievements. The episode demonstrated that science fiction could quietly confront real social issues without delivering a lecture. Instead of preaching equality directly, it simply showed a future where diversity existed naturally aboard the Enterprise. That vision helped inspire generations of viewers. But if Plato's Stepchildren explored prejudice, the next episode explored something far darker. Number 1, whom gods destroy. Some villains seek power. Others simply enjoy chaos. Garth of Izar becomes both. Once celebrated as one of Starfleet's greatest captains, Garth is now imprisoned inside a remote psychiatric facility after descending into complete madness. When Kirk and Spock arrive with medical supplies, they expect a routine delivery. Instead, they discover that the patients have taken control. Garth now rules the institution. Even more frightening, he has acquired an alien ability that allows him to change his physical appearance into anyone he chooses. That single power transforms the episode into a psychological thriller. Nobody knows who they can trust. At any moment, Garth could become a doctor, a guard, or even Captain Kirk himself. Rather than relying on space battles or monsters, the episode creates tension through paranoia. Every conversation becomes a test. Every face becomes suspicious. As Garth's grip on reality slips further away, his behavior grows increasingly unpredictable. He shifts from charming host to ruthless tyrant within seconds, manipulating everyone around him while insisting that he alone deserves to rule the galaxy. The asylum itself becomes a prison filled with fear rather than healing. For broadcasters during the early 1970s, themes involving insanity, psychological torture, and unstable violence were considered far too disturbing for younger audiences. The BBC ultimately declined to show the episode during its original run, grouping it with several others considered unsuitable because of their focus on madness, torture, and disease. Today, Whom Gods Destroy stands as one of the franchise's earliest attempts to examine mental instability through science fiction. It asks an uncomfortable question. Can a legendary hero become history's greatest threat if they lose control of their own mind? For its time, that was a remarkably bold idea. But these controversial episodes didn't appear by accident. They were the result of one creator's determination to make science fiction more than simple entertainment. In the next part, we'll explore how Gene Roddenberry built Star Trek into a franchise that challenged governments, inspired scientists, influenced real-world technology, and continued pushing boundaries long after these controversial episodes first aired. The controversies surrounding Miri, Plato's Stepchildren, and Whom Gods Destroy weren't random accidents. They reflected something much bigger about Star Trek itself. From the very beginning, creator Gene Roddenberry believed science fiction should do more than entertain. He wanted it to ask uncomfortable questions about society while disguising those questions behind alien worlds and futuristic adventures. That approach was revolutionary during the 1960s. Instead of directly debating racism, war, or political division, Star Trek imagined distant civilizations facing similar struggles. Viewers could watch a story about aliens and realize it was actually about humanity. This clever storytelling allowed the series to discuss controversial issues that many television dramas simply couldn't approach at the time. It also explains why broadcasters sometimes became nervous. Episodes dealing with torture, disease, psychological trauma, or social prejudice weren't just fictional adventures. They challenged audiences to think differently. In some countries, television executives believed those ideas were simply too intense for family viewing. The BBC eventually explained that several episodes were withheld because they dealt with madness, torture, sadism, and disease in ways considered unsuitable for their early evening audience. But the original series wasn't the only version of Star Trek to spark controversy. Years later, Star Trek: The Next Generation shocked audiences with one of its most graphic episodes ever produced, Conspiracy. By the late 1980s, viewers expected The Next Generation to focus on diplomacy, exploration, and philosophical debates. Then came Conspiracy. The episode begins as a political mystery. Captain Picard discovers that high-ranking Starfleet officers are behaving strangely. Secret meetings, suspicious orders, and unexplained disappearances suggest that something has infiltrated the Federation itself. Eventually, the horrifying truth is revealed. Alien parasites have taken control of key Starfleet leaders, turning them into unwilling hosts while secretly manipulating the Federation from within. The climax remains one of the most shocking moments in franchise history. To stop the invasion, Picard and Commander Riker are forced into a desperate confrontation with one of the infected officers. What follows is unlike almost anything audiences had previously seen in Star Trek. Practical effects depicting graphic body horror stunned viewers and pushed the boundaries of what network television normally allowed. Some broadcasters considered the episode too disturbing for younger audiences, and warnings accompanied certain airings. Even decades later, many fans still describe it as one of the franchise's most unsettling hours because of its unexpectedly gruesome finale. It proved that Star Trek could embrace horror without abandoning its thoughtful storytelling. Then another series challenged audiences in a completely different way. Rejoined. Unlike earlier controversies involving violence or disease, Deep Space Nine found itself at the center of a cultural debate. The episode follows Lieutenant Commander Jadzia Dax as she reconnects with a former lover from the previous host of her Trill symbiont. Although Trill society discourages rekindling relationships from previous lifetimes, emotions prove impossible to ignore. The story eventually leads to one of television's earliest same-sex kisses in a major science fiction series. By modern standards, the moment is remarkably restrained. But in 1995, it generated intense discussion. Several broadcasters and distributors hesitated to air the episode without edits, fearing backlash from conservative audiences. Others embraced it as another example of Star Trek using science fiction to encourage conversations about acceptance and equality. What makes the episode memorable isn't controversy alone. It's that the relationship is treated with dignity rather than sensationalism. Once again, Star Trek wasn't trying to provoke audiences simply for attention. It was asking whether prejudice still has a place in humanity's future. That question remains just as relevant today. And perhaps that's the franchise's greatest strength. For nearly 60 years, Star Trek has repeatedly challenged viewers to imagine a better version of society, not because it ignores humanity's flaws, but because it believes we can overcome them. Many ideas that once frightened television executives now seem completely ordinary. Interracial relationships, diverse leadership, women in command, global cooperation, scientific curiosity, respect for different cultures. All of these concepts appeared in Star Trek long before they became common on television. Ironically, many episodes that broadcasters once considered dangerous are now praised for their courage and creativity. History has a funny way of changing perspectives. What one generation labels controversial, the next generation often celebrates as visionary. Today, the episodes once hidden from audiences are widely available through home media and streaming services, allowing fans to judge them for themselves rather than through the fears of television executives decades ago. Looking back, these stories reveal something fascinating. The real controversy wasn't simply violence, or disease, or psychological horror. It was the willingness to challenge social expectations. Star Trek asked difficult questions when many people preferred simple answers. Sometimes that made audiences uncomfortable. Sometimes it made broadcasters nervous. And occasionally it led to bans that lasted years. Yet those same stories helped transform science fiction into a genre capable of exploring ethics, politics, philosophy, and human rights in ways few television shows had attempted before. That legacy continues today. Every new Star Trek series still wrestles with complex moral dilemmas, proving that Gene Roddenberry's original vision never truly disappeared. Perhaps that's why these controversial episodes remain so fascinating. They remind us that great science fiction isn't about predicting the future. It's about challenging the present. And few franchises have done that more boldly than Star Trek. So, what do you think? Were these episodes genuinely too disturbing for their time? Or did television executives overreact to stories that simply dared to be different? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed uncovering these hidden chapters of television history, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss another deep dive into the stories Hollywood almost didn't let us see.